but inside, you may be criticizing and a lot of things there. And there's a lot of pride, for example. And you may be thinking that you are better than the others and holier than the others. So that's also against the evangelical understanding of poverty by St. Francis of Assisi.
Right.
So it really applies to the different dimensions of life, but definitely material poverty is one of them.
Right. Right.
So it sounds like, Father, at its very root, it's attachment.
Mm-hmm.
Attachment to material things, attachment to my pride, perhaps, to my ego, attachment to what I think people will say about me or what people will think about me. That's a very powerful and profound concept. And like
it's non-appropriation. Huh?
Yes.
You are clinging to it. This is mine. It's non-appropriation. We come to think of it existentially. We are all poor. We are all poor, actually, existentially. What do we have that we have right now that has not been given ultimately? If you, a more spiritual understanding of our condition. Our life is only given to us. It's only on a loan. Eventually, we will have to give it back to our Creator.
And like you were saying, Father, earlier, it's really that utter dependence on the generosity of God.
Generosity of God and His providence.
It's very...
Yes.
I want to pick up on that point, Lynn, and Father Robert, as I'm listening to you, it strikes me, just to process everything you've said, which has been fascinating. We talk about how poverty has been the bedrock of the Franciscan order, but at the same time has also been the most, it is the value that Franciscans, I would say, are most known for, perhaps even more than ecology and creation. At the same time, we were just talking about how it goes beyond economic poverty, and I'm thinking now about intellectual poverty. I marvel at how 800 years later, the Franciscan order is going strong, despite its almost total, maybe not total, but it's disregard for hierarchy, for instance, which we got from the Romans, I guess, right?
Yes,
and then all of a sudden, here comes Francis and this total disregard for hierarchy. How the Franciscans have survived without that. That strikes me as a form of intellectual poverty, right? Because you have to give up your pride for being, I'm the boss, I'm the, whatever title it is that a normal hierarchy would have. Can you give us a little bit of an insight into the Franciscan hierarchy and how maybe that ties back to poverty as well?
Yeah, as we know, especially in the time of Francis, even the church was, was connected to power. And wealth, and wealth also. Estates and etc. And that's why St. Francis will tell the brothers to shun away even from titles and even from privileges, like asking privileges from the Holy Father. Privileges that will benefit the brothers. And he even actually said, Holy Father, do not make my brothers bishops. Do not make my brothers bishops. Although there have been Franciscan bishops, also Pope.
Not somebody who calls himself Francis.
Now, because the Holy Father may appoint a friar to become a bishop. But again, your attitude about even the appointment or the responsibility. If you are appropriating it, this is mine, it makes you proud, and you may think that you are better than the others, then that is already against the virtue of poverty. Intellectual poverty does not mean that Franciscans should not study. Something like that. No, we have some real scholars in our Franciscan history, St. Bonaventure. But again, even your knowledge, eventually it's because of God. And you have been gifted with knowledge and you have cooperated to develop your knowledge and you use it at the disposal of the good of other people. Then you are exercising intellectual poverty. Or you do not know everything.
Yes, that's right. Just an acknowledgement that you're not the final word when it comes to anything.
St. Francis said towards the end of his life, let's begin again. For until now we have done nothing. After many years of holy life, that kind of attitude. Expropriation again. expropriation.
So ultimately, Father Robert, what I hear you saying is, we can use all the gifts because that is gift from God, but it is our intention and our attitude towards it.
Yes, yes.
So if our intention, for example, with economic or material wealth, is to appropriate that for ourselves, then it means nothing really.
Yes, yes.
Or even if we appear on the surface to be sharing it with other people, but if the intention is to, let's say, be recognized, or to be validated, or to be praised by other people,
there are strings attached.
There are strings, and parang it in effect it neutralizes the intent, because the intention behind it is really the vanity,
interior and exterior, the exercise of the virtue. We might call it virtue, no? But for us, we have taken it as a vow. Like for people, it is a virtue. It's a virtue that is also for everyone, actually.
And ultimately, it goes back to discernment and prayer.
Yes, yes, yes.
As we have discussed in a previous episode with you, it really is prayer and the discernment process during our prayer life. And listening to both the external and the internal sense.
Father Robert, we sit here today in Santuario de San Antonio.
Yes.
In an earlier episode, we talked a little about the history of how the Franciscans ended up here. And as I learned more about the Franciscan order, the contrast is striking. And I can't help but think that there's an important lesson here for all of us in terms of how Franciscans are here. Certainly, by the grace of God. What are your observations about this situation, and perhaps some suggestions you might have for parishioners of Santuario and even non-parishioners who are looking at this contrast, which is it's amazing.
Yes.
We're here, but for the grace
why
of God.
are there Franciscans in Forbes Park?
Yes, no. To put it.
What are they doing there? Are they not?
It's a fair question to ask.
Poor sons of Saint Francis, something like that.
Yes.
Some people have asked me that. Franciscans, why are you in Forbes? Immediately, I tell them. We had been there before Forbes became Forbes Park.
That's a fair answer, Father
Robert. In terms of an affluent place.
Yes.
Now, if you look at the congregation of Mother Teresa of Calcutta, they take a fourth vow. The fourth vow is the service to the poorest of the poor. You will not see them in a rich place because that's part of their fourth vow. Now, in living the Franciscan virtue of vow of poverty, it does not mean that we cannot be among the rich.
Yes.
So this is very important in St. Francis's terminology when he talks about ministry among people, among the Saracens, etc. So we are in Forbes Park. So the question is, how do we live among, for example, affluent people in the society? We must continue to be Franciscans, imbued with the spirit of poverty as emulated to us by St. Francis and even by the Gospel in many different ways. For example, simplicity of life, but very clear for us, for example, as Franciscans, the issue of ownership, for example, and use. It's very clear.
Yes.
We do not actually have personal properties. As Franciscans, we do not have personal properties. I do not have a personal car. So as religious, actually, that's also very clear. So, and also the values that we live here, how do we relate to the people? A very important understanding also is the terminology of order of lesser brothers. Lesser brothers. Friars minor. It's a friars minor. For St. Francis, the friars minor or the lesser brothers must always try to be brothers to all. So meaning to say, rich and poor, you must be brothers to all. And even creation. Now, you add their lesser brothers. So if you are dealing with a brother, I relate with this person as a brother, then I go down. That's the meaning of lesser there.
I see.
Huh? All kinds of people that I relate with, there is no experience of domination and lording it over, and I am better. It said to be subjected to all. Right? So that is one expression, definitely, aside from hopefully we try as much as possible to live poorly and simply. And as we know, the parish, I have met so many wonderful people in the parish.
Yes.
Who are also living the spirit of poverty. And we know our programs, how do we animate, as Franciscans, how do we animate the parishioners to be in solidarity with the poor? We know we have a lot of social programs.
Yes.
And hopefully we are helping also in the discernment of what is necessary and what is needed. Yeah. And even if you are rich, etc.
In fact, you could argue that it is an equally important role that you're playing living among the affluent, because without that, the affluent would not have any examples to live by in terms of living in poverty. Maybe not economic poverty, but the other forms of poverty that you just highlighted. So it's important. Your presence here is for a reason, clearly for a reason.
St. Francis would say, we are pilgrims and strangers. Huh? And so you get assigned here in corps, but you do not appropriate it. You know that you will be transferred again, will be going to other places. So in many different ways.
So in essence, Father, it's not just proclaiming that, but being a witness.
Being a witness.
By virtue of the life that you live and lead. Hopefully it rubs off on us lay people who are here.
Yeah, hopefully.
Hopefully.
Our life of simplicity, supposedly, and a simple lifestyle and humility, and even actual real poverty, in terms of simple things and many other ways.
And that's probably the best word to describe how to distinguish between what is useful and what is necessary. Simplicity. Living the simple life. And so as the lay person, and I'm sure our viewers would be really interested in hearing this, what are some of the concrete ways we can be witnesses to this? Living simple lives and understanding that it's really the intention behind it. And it's what drives us to do or to live this kind of life. What other suggestions would you have, Father Robert, for us? For us lay people, ordinary lay people?
I think what we mentioned a while ago about that guide for discernment, about what is useful, what is needed, what is just a mere wants, and what can be superfluous and even sinful and scandalous. That can be a very point for discernment. So we may be living in a rich, we may be here in a rich parish, or I belong to, one person may belong to a higher level of the society, but if he practices this kind of discernment, and he's aware that because he has money, he can just buy anything that he wants, because he's also conscious of many people who are poor, then I think that person is exercising also poverty there. Because instead of just buying what the person may not actually need, it's better to share it with other people who are in need of it. Right? And that's why St. Francis, even in his salutation of virtues, he connects simplicity to wisdom. Like a sister of wisdom, he mentions. No? He mentions about humility as sister of poverty. So we know some people who are rich, they are well established, and they have achieved a lot, but they have remained very humble. And so that is one way to show it. And you are not flaunting your riches. So we know some people, even in the parish, they have remained very simple and very humble, not flaunting that they are actually very, very rich. So that is an expression also. I have seen also even in the parish, they may be rich, but their facilities or their the things that they use are continue to be simple.
Mm-hmm.
So these are many ways, and also treating, for example, your household helps and employees.
Yes. Yeah.
How do you show your spirit there, not only of poverty but also of charity, and being concerned beyond the parish, being concerned beyond your family, with the many people who are suffering. Now, when you talk about living this virtue of poverty, especially for the lay people, you can perhaps look at it in three ways. The first one is living for the poor. One person can be rich, but he can live for the poor. By meaning to say, he is serving the poor, he is extending help to the poor. So you are helping the poor. Everything that you may be doing will be for the poor. For example, in our parish, we have a lot of programs for the poor. It's one of them. Second is being with the poor. Solidarity with the poor. For example, when you have some rich people who are actually going out of their circles and really being with the poor. We have experiences of some people who are directly going to the poor areas, for example. Because I can give something for the poor, I can just give money, no? And I can donate food, bags, etc. So that can be for the poor. But being with the poor really is going to the places of the poor. Going to the hospitals where many poor sick people are there. And for example, wanting to help in the education of poor children. You are really being there. That's another level. And the third level is being poor yourself. Being poor yourself. And how do you do that as a rich person in many different ways? And then you can talk about the external expressions and also the internal expressions there.
That's a great segue, Father Robert, because that was going to be my next question, which is, we've talked much about the exterior manifestations of poverty. Let's spend some time on poverty of spirit. How does one live their interior lives in poverty? What practical advice might you have for those of us who want to better understand what that means, the interior life of poverty?
First of all, I think it's connected to your life of prayer, your life of relationship with God. St. Francis would say, "Who are you, God, and who am I?" Knowing yourself before God. And then was talking about utter dependence on the generosity of God. So when you recognize who you are before God, because even the word humility comes from the word humus, comes from the word humus, your soil. So who you are before God, and that experience of utter existential poverty, that everything is a gift, that everything is given to you. Now, if that is your experience also, how do you relate with your fellow brothers and sisters, with other people? And so that must be manifested also with that experience that in the way you relate with others, you relate also with that recognition that that brother is also gifted, and the brother is a gift from God. And you have been given this gift from God in the person of your brother or your sister. And how do you relate with that gift that is coming from God? And again, the other aspects of the virtue of poverty there is in terms of simplicity and humility. How do you relate with people? Your actuations in words and in deeds. Because sometimes we can also be lording it over others in interpersonal relationships and even in a wider context of relationships. What is the place of the poor in your life? Are they part of your equations? Are they part of your antenna, for example?
Right.
So solidarity and sharing in that regard. And what is really the objective of your life ultimately? It's becoming, what do you call this? Rich in an unlimited way.
Yes, yes.
I can't help, Father Robert, but think that in all of this, it really is about gratitude, of being grateful and appreciating all the bounty that is given, because once we start appropriating, we forget to be grateful. Because then
this is my own.
Yes, because we have this sense of entitlement. This is mine, and when I don't get what I want, then I don't have enough.
Yes, yes. That's very true, and that's why experience of Saint Francis of gratefulness, no, and it's connected very much to joy. Experience of joy. If I am loved by God unconditionally and providentially, He will take care of me. No? He takes care of me, and everything has been given. Everything is a gift, so I cannot but be grateful to God.
Right.
And also even to other people.
Right.
And so there's an experience of freedom. I do not need to accumulate and appropriate what I do not even need beyond my lifetime.
Right.
Sometimes that can happen, People can be accumulating and appropriating even beyond their lifetime. Or perhaps even generations after their children. Something like that. But that is not what life is all about.
The attachment.
Yes.
The attachment enslaves us. And so we lose out, like you were saying, Father, that freedom to really just be present in the moment and to appreciate and to be grateful for the bounty.
Yes,
the
yes.
Bounty of, it's very profound.
Yes. Definitely, even material things we need. But how much do you really need? That's again a point for discernment.
Yes. In fact, it seems like we started this session with the synaproprio discussions without anything of my own, and it sounds like we're ending on that session as well. It seems to come full circle to that, because and it's fitting that it began with Genesis, right? Because that's where it all began, and this powerful discernment that it wasn't even really disobedience, which was just a manifestation of the sense of attachment or desire for attachment that began all of this.
Possession.
Yes.
Possessions.
That is another way of reading the incident, the book of Genesis, the fall of our parents, because they were whispering of the evil one. He doesn't want you to eat the tree of life in the center because you will be like gods. And so again, they wanted to be like. They wanted. So that's appropriation.
Appropriation, yes.
Trying to take what does not belong to them. That's why St. Francis would even say it's a blasphemy. The blasphemy to claim what does not belong to you. So they were claiming what belonged to God. And you're right, it's not just a sin of obedience. And that's why St. Francis, very symbolic and very powerful, towards the end of his life, he wanted to go naked again. St. Francis went naked a number of times.
In more ways than one. Naked.
He went naked before his town people in Assisi, before he returned with clothes to his father. That is this appropriation. Not only family ties, and even your class, because he went out of his class. And he went out, St. Francis would say, he left the world of Assisi. The values of greed, the values of violence and domination, etc. And he lived outside the walls of Assisi, among the lepers and among the poor. And as we know also, he's so a poor person, and he gave of his clothes, and towards the end of his life, he wanted also to die naked. He wanted to die naked, to show this in a very powerful way again, that everything is a gift from God, even one's life. Right? That you cannot even appropriate your life. Right? But you know, Brother Elias, superior, the superior at the time, because he already resigned it even after this, and he was told, no, wear this habit. We are just lending it to you. Now, what was the struggle now? If St. Francis would insist, no, I want to die naked, he was clinging to his will. But he also gave up that will, his desire to die naked. I could not even appropriate this will, this desire to go naked, to show that everything really is given. I cannot appropriate anything. Now he could not even appropriate his own will. And so he obeyed.
It's very powerful.
So you can see also the humility.
Yes.
You know, when we die, we show that very clearly. We give our last breath. We return what we have been given. And so if you live that as an attitude throughout your life, you are living a life of poverty. In many different ways. You are not cling. You get hurt, you do not cling to it. They say bad things to you, and perhaps your image is destroyed before others, but you do not cling to it. You do not even allow yourselves to be disturbed. Perhaps at one point, you are doing very well economically, but at some point, for one reason or another, you go lower in your economic status. It's okay. It's okay. I can start all over again. So if you have that attitude, you are really free. We are children of God. We are children of God. And that's why many biblical passages that were very important to St. Francis.
Yes. 800 years later, he's still teaching us.
Yes.
And we are still learning.
We are still learning.
It's we are all a work in progress. And as a lay person, it sounds like the first step is really to step outside my comfort zone, to start reflecting and thinking and discerning, like you were saying, Father, those steps of how we can live that interior life of poverty. Prayer, and prayer. Very, very powerful message.
But you will also, last point maybe, in the Franciscan spirit, you will always find this reforming spirit. So you will always, like for example, right now, we have 3 main branches, the Capuchins, Conventuals, and us. But there are also new Franciscan groups that belong to we call it the third order regular. So you will always see this reforming spirit and renewing spirit.
Yeah, the proof is in the renewal and the reforming of the spirit. That's by your fruit you shall know them.
And that in itself is not clinging to one way of doing things. That there are so many paths to the same truth.
Yes.
Well, Father Robert, as usual, you have blessed us with your wisdom and your insight. We thank you very much for being with us today. And on that note, then,
thank you very much, Father.
Thank you very much.
Always,
Thank you, Father.
Always a privilege.
Always a blessing. God bless.
Good to be with you again.
God bless. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Father Robert, Len, and Dennis. That was a very powerful discussion on the Franciscan value of poverty. In a dream, Saint Francis was asked the question, "Whom do you want to follow, the master or the servant?" I'm sure all of us would agree that we would like to follow the master. But what would this entail? Poverty, in every aspect and sense of the word, and knowing that nothing is of my own. Economic poverty, it doesn't mean having to give up all our belongings as Saint Francis did, but rather to share what we have with those who have less, without the intent of recognition. spiritual poverty, acknowledging our need for God's grace. Intellectual poverty, accepting that we do not know everything. Therefore, we must collaborate with others. In essence, poverty is the appropriation of God's gifts to us with others who are also gifts from God. It is grounded in simplicity, generosity, humility, and gratitude. At this point, we would like to again turn to you, our viewers. What have you taken away from this session? How have my attachments affected the way I live a life of poverty in the context of Franciscan spirituality? Please take a few moments to write down this question and reflect on the answer. Next week, we will start our session with a sharer and answer frequently asked questions and questions we gathered from our viewers. Thank you for joining us in today's Fireside Chats. See you next week in our final episode entitled Ask Me Anything, as the Santuario de San Antonio Parish Pastoral Team joins us in an hour of Q&A. For those who have questions that they've been wanting to be answered, please feel free to send them to ssapmakati@gmail.com, and we will try to answer as many questions as possible.
Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me so love. Where there is injury, let me so pardon. Where there is doubt, let there be faith. Where there's despair, let me so hope. Where there is darkness, let there be light. Where there is sadness, joy. Oh, divine Master, grant that I may never see understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. To